Today we celebrate the 11th Sunday of our ordinary days and the liturgical year B. And today's readings present to us about the kingdom comparing with the seed, how insignificant the seed, and God is comparing with the seed. So it says, the kingdom of God will come in all its fullness at the end of time, which is going to grow from the small, it's going to grow and it's going to be fullness at the end of time. So as we heard in the gospel today, two parables, very important. The first, the parable of the seed that is growing by itself. Something is growing by itself. And the second, the parable of the mustard seed is the smallest one, but it grows, it becomes the biggest among the shrubs. So today God really comparing his kingdom into a seed. In the first parable of the seed that is growing by itself tells us that the kingdom of God, it is like a man who sowed the seed and the seed grew by itself. Whether the man was awake or he was sleeping, the seed grew by itself, but he did not know how did it happen. But when the harvest time comes, the man reaps the crops, as it says. So having sown the seed, farmer cannot do anything. He can just patiently wait. The seed underneath of the ground, powerfully, invisibly, is working and is growing. He can really do nothing at this point except patiently wait for the earth to work on the seed until the crop is ready for him to harvest. And Jesus is saying today that the kingdom of God is like that. Something is growing which we are not aware about it. So God is often at work in our own personal lives too, and in the life of our families, in our communities, in ways that we do not fully understand how God is working like the seed. There is often something hidden and invisible to God's way of working in our life. God can be working in life-giving ways. We go about our daily living while we sleep, while we are awake. St. Paul says, I am confident of this, that the one who began a good work among you will bring it to completion by the day of Jesus Christ. St. Paul says, God began good work in our lives at the moment of our conception, and then continue at the moment in our baptism when we enter into the life of grace. The God continue works throughout our lives like the mustard seed. So God is always at work within us and among us and helping us to grow as a human being, enabling us to become like Christ. There is work for us to do. Just as the farmer had to sow the seed at the beginning and then bring in the harvest at the end, but we have to do one thing. Our work, everything we do, is consist in allowing God to do his work in us. And that really requires our desire, our willingness, that we want to allow God to intervene into our life, to work in our life, his grace to grow in our life. We need to allow. We may not be always aware about God's work in our life, especially those moments when we are facing failings or struggling. And yet, even when we do not see God's good work in our lives, it is always happening. As St. Paul reminds us today in the second reading, when it comes to God, we go forward, we move forward by faith. not by sight. And because we go forward by faith, we are always full of confidence in Him. And that's what we allow God to work in our life. In the second parable, in our gospel today presents the parable of the mustard seed, has also something to tell us. First, we are reminded that, like the mustard seed, tiny, small, that remind us whatever is small, whatever is insignificant, simple, or ordinary has a great potential. Even the tiny things has great potential. Something bigger, something beautiful can come out. Simple things we say or do can have a big influence and impact. Jesus is saying that not only is God always work in a good way in our lives, but that God can also be working powerfully through our smallest gestures of goodness, kindness, and love, like the mustard seed. God can do great things in and through our ordinary, everyday actions that can seem very insignificant. Sometimes we may neglect it. We may think that is nothing, or it is nothing for others. But if we scatter the mustard seed of God's love through our small daily choices that we make, we are making an opening for God to work creatively in our lives, and which can surprise us. In the first reading we heard today, Prophet Ezekiel prophesying how God will raise up the weak, the Israel, and the insignificant, and make them a great nation. He said, "Will pluck the chamber tree, plant, and will plant it on the mountaintop, and it will grow such a way that all the nations will take shelter." And that's what God is trying to tell us through these parables. Even the insignificant can bring us something good. We should not neglect it. We need to appreciate our own small gestures of loving kindness, because through them God will work to bring God's kingdom to earth. Very often I like to give examples of the family life. The way you treat your children, the way you show your good example, everything is small gestures, but that is counted. Through that God is spreading His kingdom. We cannot build the kingdom of God on earth. Only God can do that. But God needs us to sow that mustard seed of love and of hope, so that He can work powerfully through our seemingly small and insignificant actions. One more example I like to give, that is Mother Teresa, all of you know. When at the beginning of Mother Teresa, before she began the work, she heard the voice, Jesus speaking to her, "I thirst." I thirst means what God was telling her is that God is thirsting for our soul and for our love. And that's the voice that Mother heard at the beginning, Mother Teresa. But Mother Teresa allowed that small seed of voice, God inspiring her. She allowed that voice to grow in her heart, in her life. And she was never ignoring it. But she let that word grew in her heart. And slowly, the members, the girls, start joining her in her congregation. And slowly, she began to open houses, different places. Today, if you see all over the world, Mother Teresa's sisters are there. And the most beautiful thing is, every house you go, they have the poor, sick and suffering, child, old, all kind of persons, full. And that's what Jesus is trying to tell us. The small gestures, the Mother Teresa that heard the word, she let that word grew. And the congregation grew all over the world. Now many of our poor are taking shelter. Exactly in the first reading also, Prophet Ezekiel says, the the stem, the plant is going to grow, and all the nations are going to take shelter. And that is what all about kingdom of God. So we should not neglect any gestures of a small act of things that we do. Also in the Gospel, Jesus very often he mentioned the value of giving a cup of cold water to one of these little one, whoever does the good. And if you offer him or her a cup of cold water, you are doing to me. No? Just a small gesture. Also Jesus notices the widow was offering in the temple just 2 coins, 2 pieces of coins. And Jesus praises her, telling her disciples, look, she is the one who put all she had. So Jesus notices the small gestures, and that's where the kingdom of God is built. So God is continuously at work through all those small acts of self-giving sacrifice, self-giving services that are plentiful we can find in our parish, in our community, in our blogs, wherever we do the small gestures. And God is working through that. And today's parables encourage us to be hopeful because of all the good work that God is doing within us to spread His kingdom. So today in this Holy Eucharist, let us give thanks to God for His kingdom. And we ask God to continue to make His kingdom grow within us. We also ask God to help us to sow the seed of His kingdom, and that is to preach His word and proclaim the good news and give the good witness those who are around us. May our Mother Mary also intercede for each one of us, that we may always allow God to work in our life, and we may also do the work to spread the kingdom by doing small gestures of action of love.